Hello, dear listeners, and hello to you specifically, the one adjusting your blanket and testing how the mug warms your palms. Find a comfortable corner. Let your breathing slow. Tonight, the wind carries a true story of maps and monsters, of stardust and stubborn hearts. Ready? Then let's begin. They called it a normal storm until the letters appeared. Mira stood on the seawall above the fishing village of Alderame, shawl tied around her shoulders, ink-stained fingers tucked into her sleeves. She was a storyteller by trade and a collector of rumors by stubborn habit. Waves pummeled the basalt, gull-wing gusts threw brine into her hair. And then, as lightning stitched across the cloud belly, the sky began to write. No, not write, engrave. Silver lines burned through the cloud, not fading as lightning should but lingering, braiding into loops and axes, pricking into coordinates and cursive whorls. A map, Mira thought. A living map. She tipped back her head, mouth open in a laugh that was part terror, part awe. The storm answered by etching an emblem above the horizon. A fox, tail lifted, stars tangled in its whiskers. Jax! Mira shouted into the wind. Jax, bring your lenses. On the slope below, in a cottage built from ship ribs and stubbornness, Jax heard her through the storm's rip. He left the clockwork he had been coaxing to breathe, an insect of brass and paper wains, snatched up his telescopic goggles and his satchel full of copper chalk, and thudded outside. Jax was a tinkerer by skill and a solver of impossible problems by pure instinct. He had built a mechanical arm for himself after the storm 6 winters ago, an arm that hummed when he was excited and clicked when he was lying. It hummed now. At the seawall he found Mira pointing, eyes alight. Together they watched the skylines lock into a single, unblinking map that arced from horizon to horizon like a river of pale fire. It pulsed, it waited, and from the black mouth of the harbor, a third light appeared. A fox, yes, but not emblematic, alive. It stepped out of the surf as if the sea were a gentle hallway. Its fur held constellations caught in fine threads. Its paws left prints that glittered before sinking into the stone. The fox sniffed Mira's ink and Jax's oil, considered their mixture, and sneezed a small, friendly star that bounced once and vanished. You're not possible, Jax told it, which was exactly the sort of greeting he gave to miracles. The fox tipped its head, as if to say, I am many things, and possible is only one of them. Then it looked up at the sky map and yipped. Mira's voice, the one made for markets and hearths and town squares, softened into the tone she kept for endings and beginnings. It's an invitation. Jax's arm clicked. Or a trap. Both, Mira decided. That's how the best invitations work. By morning, the map had not faded. In the wet light that followed storms, the village gathered to argue. Fishermen with rope burns on their palms, net menders with copper needles in their mouths, children with pockets full of shells that hummed like distant bees. Some said turn away, others said sell the coordinates. A few said pray. Mira said, storytellers are poor, but we have plenty of courage and no rent. Jax said, I've got a satchel of gadgets that want to be useful. The fox said nothing at all, which was the strongest vote of confidence of the three. They packed. Mira carried notebooks wrapped in oilcloth and a knife with a mother-of-pearl handle. Jax buckled on his mechanical arms climbing kit and slipped a handful of tuning forks into his pocket, tools for persuading stubborn doors. The fox carried only its light and its attention, 2 things it distributed with radical generosity. They followed the first coordinate east, into the glassweed flats where reeds were made of translucent silica and sang when the wind passed. The sky map guided them not with arrows but with temperature. The nearer they drew to a point, the warmer the silver lines glowed, like sun on a spoon. Half a day into the marsh they reached a ridge crowned with petrified bird bones. Beneath, cut into the stone like a doorway that had changed its mind, was an aperture sealed with a pane of skyglass, the material that forms when lightning writes on sand. The pane was glossy as a calm sea and tinted the color of a bruise. Jax knelt. "Hinges," he murmured. His arm hummed as micro-gears extended a rootlet of brass. "Old," he added. "And listening." Mira crouched beside him. "Listening for what?" Jax tapped the pane with one tuning fork. It sang a clear, bell-like note. The fox raised its head and answered with a chord that no human throat could manage, low and high together, sorrow and sun. The pane shivered, sighed, and slid away into the stone, revealing a chamber carved with spiral script. Mira's hand flew to her mouth. "It's written like the sky." Inside, a platform of black basalt, a compass without cardinal points, and the first of the map's anchors, a pillar bearing a rotating ring that clicked softly with each degree, as if counting a heartbeat that belonged to the world. "Skyriders," Mira said, reading aloud from the walls. "Not gods, not storms, people, long ago." Jax adjusted his goggles. "Engineers, then. My kind of ghosts." The Polar's ring had 3 empty sockets. Each socket matched a symbol that had glowed brightest in last night's storm: fox, wave, and seed. The fox set its paw on the ring. The basalt warmed. 3 anchors to unlock, Jax guessed. 3 journeys. And when they're set, what? The map changes? Mira's eyes had followed the spirals to a single, sunken inscription. The letters were cut deep, like the maker had carved them while shaking. "When the anchors are turned," she translated, "the sleeper will breathe again." The chamber exhaled, or perhaps it was Mira. Outside, the reeds began to sing as the wind moved. A ship's bell rang far away where no sea should be. "The sleeper?" Jax repeated. "That's never a small word." Mira ran her thumb over the word breathe. "There are monsters that devour. There are monsters that watch. And there are monsters that dream. This one sleeps. We will have to be careful with it." From the entrance, the fox lifted its head, ears pricked. With a soft huff it trotted outside and angled its nose northwest. "Second coordinate," Jax said, standing. "Wave, wave," Mira agreed, though her voice had gone thoughtful. "And someone else is already walking there." Because along the ridge, between bone shadows and singing weeds, were boot prints impressed into the damp sugar of the flats. Big feet, impatient pace. The prints glimmered with the same dull silver that lived in the map. Grim Rawl, Mira named, because rumors had long fingers. Treasure hunter, collector, breaker of unbreakable locks, stealer of unstealable things. Jax's arm clicked. "I've read about him. He believes objects are loyal if you pay them enough. He's wrong, but he's rich. And he's following our sky," Mira said. They looked at each other, Jax with practicality tightening his jaw, Mira with a storyteller's joy at the shape of a good problem, and the fox with stars blinking slow as a heartbeat. Then they started walking, and the reeds sang them onward in 1,000 crystal voices. By sunset they reached the shore the map demanded. Not an ocean but a lake vast enough to pretend. The water was milk blue and slick as glass. Across its surface drifted islands of pumice that chimed when they touched. In the middle of the lake rose a stone spire drilled with windows, like a flute too big for any hand. "Wave," Mira said again, softer. On the near shore they found a boat that had once been ordinary but had learned a better trick. Its hull was coated in skyglass, its oars thin as dragonfly wings. A note had been etched into the stern with a diamond point. "Borrow me bravely." Jax grinned, all engineering and boyhood. "I like whoever wrote that." He looked at Mira. "Shall we borrow?" The fox leapt in first and turned a circle on the bow, leaving paw prints that twinkled before sinking into the varnish. Mira untied the rope, and Jax slid them onto the lake. The boat moved like a thought. They were halfway to the flute spire when the water below them shadowed. A shape thicker than any fish, smoother than any eel, turned once and surfaced. It was a whale, yes, but not a sea whale. A sky whale that had fallen and learned to swim. Its skin held cloud stripes, its eye was a dark, patient well. Mira leaned forward. "Hello, traveler." The whale rolled its eye to consider them, then exhaled a thunderhead that broke into damp laughter. The fox laughed back. If a fox can laugh, and this one can, and the boat shuddered as a wave lifted it, set it down, and gave it a gentle push toward the spire. They moored at a staircase that spiraled up the spire's outer shell, each step narrow and tuned to a different note, so climbing it was like playing a music box with your feet. At the top sat a door carved with the symbol of a wave and the same 3 sockets as the marsh pillar. Jax took out his tuning forks. "Let's see if you sing true." He struck a note. The fox hummed harmony. Mira laid her palm to the door and told it a story, of storms that wrote maps and villages that argued and brave boats built from borrowed courage. The door listened, as old doors do when you are polite, and opened onto a room of moving water held in place by memory. At the center hovered the second anchor, spinning slow. Around it drifted bubbles containing memories like snow globes. A child jumping from a pier with a butterfly net. A woman teaching the sea to hold her grief in smaller waves. A man releasing a paper lamp that refused to burn. Mira reached for a bubble. The fox touched its nose to the anchor. Jax's arm extended, gears whispering. The anchor accepted them, and the room answered with a sigh so deep the stone of the spire softened around it. On their way out, Mira paused at a window and saw a boat below not like theirs, sleeker, hungrier. In it stood a man with a scar like an exclamation across his cheek. He looked up, saw them framed in the window, and lifted 2 fingers in a salute that somehow had no friendship in it at all. "Rawl," Jax murmured. Mira's storyteller's instinct put a shape around the man. Charm like a snake's, hunger like a winter. "He's close," she said. "He's quick, and he doesn't greet with stories." They descended, returned the Borrow Me boat to its mooring with a whispered thanks, and set off around the shore as night drew its shawl up. The sky map pulsed, the second of its 3 brightest symbols dimmed, and the third, seed, flared. "The seed," Mira said. "We go inland." The fox shook itself, sending a slow rainfall of sparks onto the pumice. Each spark became a lily for a heartbeat. The whale sang once, low and long, and somewhere deep beneath their feet, the sleeper shifted, rolling closer to waking. They did not sleep much that night. Stories seldom let you, when they've chosen you to carry them. Dawn came like a hush. The sky washed itself pink. The map's lines glowed softer, as if conserving strength. Mira, Jax, and the fox stepped off the pumice shore into a forest that had wanted to be trees but had become crystals instead. Quartz trunks rose in colonnades, facets catching light and throwing it into prismatic nets. Leaves were wafer-thin mica, singing in the breeze like fine chimes. The path was sand that remembered rivers. They moved quietly, because quiet was the language here. "Seed," Mira whispered. "What blooms in stone?" "Ideas," Jack said, almost to himself. They passed fossils half remembered by the earth and mushrooms that flickered with bioluminescent glamour. Each time the fox stepped, a star blossomed and faded, as if the ground were practicing for night. By mid-morning they reached it. Not a building but a bloom, a library that had grown from a seed of knowledge and become architecture. Book spines formed ribs. Stacks curved like petals. Staircases spiraled like DNA. On the threshold, an inscription. Bring what you hold most dear. Borrow what you cannot carry alone. Inside, pages rustled like birdwings. Librarians, if they were that, drifted between shelves on quiet shoes, each attended by a familiar, an inkfinch, a paper moth, a lizard with letters for scales. The air smelled of iron gall and rain. A librarian paused. A tall person with hair the color of rusted steel and eyes that reflected not your face but your questions. Welcome, travelers. We were expecting you the moment you knew you would come. That's very efficient, Jack said. His arm hummed admiration. Mira bowed in the way one bows to someone who knows how stories stack. We follow the Skyglass Map. We seek the third anchor, the seed. Then you will need the old botany, the librarian said, and a jar that remembers summer. He led them to a table where a book grew rather than sat. Its cover was bark veined with copper. Its pages were petals grown tough with use. As they approached, the book sighed open, a fern remembering to unfurl. On the first page a drawing, the sleeper, seen from a distance that respected it. It was not a beast in a simple shape. It was a continent that had learned to become an animal and then forgotten, a mountain with arteries, an ocean with ribs. It lay curled around the Earth's warm engines, sleeping the kind of sleep that rewrites what it touches. The skywriters built anchors, the librarian said softly. Not to wake it, but to keep the world from rolling too close to its dreams. The map is a maintenance manual, he added, almost fond. One the storms remember when we forget. And if someone turns the anchors wrong? Mira asked, though she already knew the shape of that grief. Then the sleeper breathes differently, the librarian said. And shorelines redraw themselves without asking permission. A crackle of footsteps interrupted them, impatient steps, boot leather angry at the idea of waiting. Grim Rawl arrived in a gust of dried salt and ambition. He removed his hat with the exaggerated grace of a man who practiced generosity only as performance. What a quaint greenhouse, he said. His eyes slid to the book. And what is that, the receipt for the sky? The librarians stood without raising their voice. Borrowers bring what they value most. Rawl smiled like a knife. And what do you accept from a man who values victory? His silence, the librarian said. For a moment, thin as paper, sharp as mint, the room held its breath. The fox rose, fur brightening. Jax's arm clicked a warning. Mira stepped between the book and Rawl with the casual authority of a storyteller guarding her last plot twist. You can't buy this story, Mira said. Everything's for sale, Rawl replied gently. Even endings. Especially endings. Not ours, Jack said, and there was steel under the courtesy. Find your own. Rawl considered, found that violence would be messy here, and relented with a flourish. Very well. We'll let scholarship play its game. He tipped his hat to the librarian, who did not accept the gesture, and sauntered into the stacks with the curated air of a man who intended to take something without making anyone notice until later. His familiar was odd. No creature at all. Just a mirror shard that hovered over his shoulder, hungry for reflections. The librarian exhaled. He thinks the map leads to a vault. It leads to a responsibility. They slid a jar across the table. Inside swirled tiny moths of light. A jar that remembers summer. You'll need to trick a winter door. They read until the light changed tone and the ink on the pages smelled like late afternoon. They learned where the seed had been planted, in a valley where rain had learned to fall upward, watering roots that dangled from the air. They learned that the third anchor could only be turned by 3 hands together, flesh, machine, and starlight. Or by one hand wearing a certain ring cut from a skyglass lens ground cruelly thin. Rawl will try for the ring, Jack said. Then we will not need it, Mira said, and shut the book with a promise not to forget. They left the library with a new weight of understanding and a literal lightness in the jar. Outside, the crystal forest had shifted color, afternoon's particular amber. The sky map burned brighter above, as if reassured by their movement. The fox nosed the jar, delighted at the trapped summer. Jax checked his tools. Mira tied her shawl tighter, like armor. They reached the valley by moonrise. It was as the old botany promised, a bowl of air where gravity negotiated a truce with wonder. Trees grew upside down from clouds that had decided to be soil, roots threading the night. Rain fell upward in silvery filaments like jellyfish tentacles returning home. Flowers bloomed along the air's invisible currents, drifting slowly as if thinking their way into existence. At the valley's heart stood the seed's chamber, a dome woven from branches, polished by the hands and hopes of generations. Its door was winter, frost filigree, ice set with tiny galaxies. Jax tried to warm it with his mechanical palm. Frost retreated and returned, stubborn as tradition. Your turn, Mira told the jar. She loosened the lid. Summer breath slipped out with a sound like lawn laughter and distant thunderstorms. The frost sighed. The door considered its options and melted. Inside, a pedestal held the third anchor, the smallest and the most alive. It ticked like a heartbeat and smelled faintly of cumin and new paper. Above it the dome opened to the night, so stars could watch. The sockets waited. Fox, wave, seed. Mira placed her storyteller's hand on the first, fingers ink-smudged and unafraid. Jax set his mechanical palm on the second, copper warm against the skyglass. The fox lifted its paw to the third, starlight traveling up its leg like a fuse. Together they turned. Something moved far below the world, the kind of movement you feel in your bones before you ever hear it. The sleeper inhaled, not waking, not yet, but aware. The sky map trembled, lines brightening, then settling into a softer glow, like breath after running. We did it, Jax whispered, relief of Belle's clear tone. Yes, Mira said, and now we must keep it done. Because at the dome's edge, a shadow detached from a shadow. Rawl had followed, of course. He stood with his hands empty and his gaze calculating and said, perfect. Thank you. He didn't reach for the anchor. He reached for the fox. Don't, Mira said, voice gone flat and dangerous. Rawl smiled like a grandfather clock that had learned a joke. Balance, my dear. 3 hands, they say. Or 1 ring. He raised his other hand to show it. A knife-proud ring cut from skyglass, its edge as thin as hunger. I prefer to travel light. Before he could step forward, the valley intervened. The upside-down trees shook their roots. The upward rain hardened into strings. The drifting flowers aligned. The library's jar on Mira's belt rattled, as if indignant on their behalf. The fox's fur lifted. Stars spiked. Grim Rawl, the valley said, but it used the voices of everything that grew. We remember you. You take and take. You return nothing. Rawl's smile thinned. I return proof that the world can be opened, he said. I return the knowledge that locks are only questions in disguise. "And what answer do you offer?" the valley asked. Rawls' mirror shard glittered. "My reflection," he said simply, as if that were gift enough. The valley bowed its branches in sorrow. "Not this time." Rawls' ring flickered, dimming as if someone had breathed on a candle. He snarled, less elegant now, more animal, and lunged. Jax met him with the smooth pivot of someone who had practiced this move in his mind 100 times. His mechanical arm caught Rawls' wrist with a gentleness that would bruise. "Your tools," Jax said, "are clever. But mine are loyal." Rawl twisted, slippery as a rumor, and broke away. He didn't take the anchor. Perhaps he understood that this was maintenance, not treasure. Perhaps he simply decided to be a problem for another day. He vanished into the dark musics of the valley like a bad idea finding an echo. The fox lowered its paw. The anchor settled. The dome side closed, returning its frost like a curtain. Above, the sky map steadied. 3 anchors set. The world held its breath, and then began to breathe easier. They slept in the valley's gentlest pocket, where the upward rain formed a blanket and the roots whispered lullabies. Mira dreamed of a childhood story told backward. Jax dreamed of cutting his arm free and growing a new one from moss and steel that would know him better. The fox dreamed no human dream at all. It dreamed of running across the backs of all the whales in all the skies. Morning returned them to the library to return what they had borrowed. The jar now faintly autumnal, less summer inside, but still warm. The librarian took it with a nod. "You will need nothing else except each other and something you have not yet decided to give up," they said. "We will keep the sleeper safe," Mira promised. "You will keep each other safe," the librarian corrected gently. "The sleeper knows how to sleep. People are the fragile ones." Outside, as they stepped back into the crystal forest, the sky map shivered once and began to erase itself, like a teacher wiping the board clean at the end of a lesson. It left only a single line, "Home." "Home?" Jax echoed. "After all that?" "Maintenance manuals end with reassembly," Mira said, smiling a little. "Put everything back where it belongs." They followed the line. The line pointed not to Alderame alone, but to a place between places, where ocean breathes toward land, where storms draft letters and then think better of sending them. It led them to the seawall where the story began and to a door none of them had noticed before, a door carved into the basalt itself, iron-banded and salt-scoured. Mira felt it before she saw it. A pressure at the base of her throat, the distinct sensation that a story wanted to be told through her mouth and would wait only so long. Jax heard it as a frequency his tuning forks could almost catch. The fox simply knew it as a place where pawprints would matter. The door did not ask for a key. It asked for a memory. "Bring what you hold most dear," the library had said. Mira closed her eyes and put her hand on the door. She offered it the memory of her grandmother's hands. Rough with nets, gentle with stories, always smelling faintly of cinders and lemons. The iron warmed. Jax offered the door a memory of failure. The day he mismeasured the angle on a brace and a small tower he loved collapsed into itself like a disappointed sigh. He had kept the bent strut ever since, not as shame but as map. The door listened to the humility in the memory and softened. The fox? What could a creature of stars offer? It placed both forepaws on the threshold and offered the memory of its first breath, taken in a place where suns were still deciding on names. The door loved that memory best of all and swung inward like a poem that chooses its reader. Within lay the heartroom of the skywriters. Not grand, a workshop more than a temple. A table scarred by knife and compass. A rack of lenses. A bellows that had not felt a foot in centuries. And, on the far wall, the arc of a machine that ran through stone into the deep earth. Their interface with the sleeper's breathing. It throbbed gently, steady as a tide. On the table sat a letter, perfectly preserved, written in spiral script and in Mira's own quick hand, the hand she had this morning. She didn't touch it. She had learned that time was a polite but mischievous neighbor. "Read it," Jax urged, softly. Mira did. "If you or me, you already know. We carried the anchors, we turned them. We learned that guardianship is not about control. You also know that the map will fade, and that what replaces it must be chosen, not inherited. This machine is old. It will need a new reader, a new hand to steady its cadence when the wind goes strange. It does not ask for a hero. It asks for someone who can love a rhythm enough to listen for it daily. You will be tempted to leave. So am I, even as I write this to you. You will want to find new storms, new sky stories. But remember, all adventures require a harbor, and sometimes the bravest thing is to become the harbor itself. If we choose to stay, it will cost us movement and buy us belonging. If we go, it will cost us belonging and buy us movement. There is no wrong choice. There is only the shape of the life you want to make around the people you want to keep. Put your ear to the machine. If you hear the world say please, stay. Mira looked up, eyes suspiciously bright. Jax didn't speak for a moment. He ran his hand, flesh and copper, along the machine's arch. It answered with a sound like a cat deciding to trust. "I could fix this," he said. "I could tune it when storms argue. I could read to it," Mira said. "Stories keep breath smooth." The fox jumped up onto the table and put its face close to the letter, whiskers flickering as if reading the spaces between the words. It looked from Mira to Jax and back, then stepped to the machine and placed its star paws on either side, lending brightness to the pulse. The rhythm evened. The whole room breathed out. "We could stay," Jax said, almost surprised at the softness in his own voice. His arm hummed a timbre he had not felt before, contentment, perhaps. "There will be problems. There will be winters. There will be festivals," Mira said, smiling now through the softness. "There will be children to teach the sky to listen. There will be nights when the map thinks about writing and decides to sleep, and we will sit with it and promise the story will be there in the morning." Outside, boots scuffed. Not villagers. Not librarians. Rawl. He'd found a different way down. There is always a different way when you don't mind who pays for it. He stepped into the heart room as if it were his by simple virtue of wanting it. The mirror shard hovered behind his shoulder, hungry for an image of triumph. "So this is it," he said. "No mockery now. Only awe. Not a vault. A valve. Go away, Grim," Mira said, as one might tell a tide to be reasonable. "This could be," Rawl gestured helplessly. "Do you understand what it is to hold the world's breath? You could make nations kneel. We could keep herb gardens from drowning," Jax said dryly. "We could stop a cliff from falling on a school. We could let the herring know when to run." "You lack ambition," Rawl said, and sounded like someone admitting a wound. "No," Mira said gently. "We carry a different kind." He stared at the machine, which refused to reflect in his mirror. He slipped the skyglass ring from his finger. For a moment they didn't breathe. He placed it on the table. "I am not invited," he said. "I can tell when a room has already chosen its keepers." The admission cost him. One could see it. He turned to go, then paused at the door. "But if ever you need a man who steals unstealable things," he said, tone recovering a flicker of its swagger, "send a story that mentions a winter orchard at noon." "I'll hear it. Why would we need that?" Jax asked. "Because there will be a day," Rawl said without malice, when something does not want to be kept safe. He touched the wall like a repentant burglar and was gone. Silence returned, companionable as an old dog. The machine breathed. The sea found it steady. Above, the sky considered writing and decided to save its ink. The fox curled around the letter, tail a soft constellation. Mira put her ear to the machine. "Please," said the world, in the voice of thin ice and gulls and children playing in lanes. "Stay." They stayed. They learned the rhythms of Alderame's heart rune the way you learn a friend's favorite jokes. Jax taught the machine to tolerate his tinkering, and in return it forgave him his enthusiasm. He found a way to let its pulse finesse the weather so storms rode only when the fields required a lesson. He built wind chimes whose tones translated changes in the earth's sleep into lullabies for fishermen. He repaired small things with enormous attention, and in that way repaired himself. Mira became the world's storyteller in residence. She read sunrise fables into the machine so it woke kind. She wrote the storm's letters and left them in bottles the sky always found. On market days she told the village what the deep breath said during the night, and sometimes she lied a little to make it kinder. And sometimes she told the hard truth, because gentleness without honesty is only sugar. The fox became the patron of children and lost sailors. It patrolled the seawall at dusk, tail a candle for late boats. When someone's grief grew too heavy to carry alone, it lay across their feet and took some of the weight into its fur. At festivals it danced with the first lantern and the last. Word of the harbor that had learned to listen traveled, as good rumors do. The librarian visited with a basket of syllables and stayed a week teaching the machine new words for snow. The sky whale returned each solstice to let the village paint songs on its side. Even Rawl sent a note once, a single sentence that read, "I stole a king's arrogance and left him humility in its place. Hope that is acceptable payment." And when the map thought about writing again, years later, during a wind that smelled like pepper and new sailcloth, Mira and Jax stood together on the seawall, the fox between them. The sky lifted its pen, considered, and instead sent a single, simple line, "Thank you." Mira raised her mug, steam up, heart quiet, and thanked it back. Now, listener, fold your blanket closer. The world under your window is breathing. You can hear it if you turn your head just so. Maps will come and maps will go. Invitations will arrive wrapped as storms, as whispers, as foxes. When they do, I hope you'll remember the harbor you can build with two good hands, one bright friend, and a promise to listen. Good night. The story will be here in the morning.